Who are you trying to impress? The Mafia boss said when he saw his wife wearing a short dress, the silence in the penthouse was not peaceful. It was heavy, weighted with the kind of expensive quiet that only money could buy, suffocating the air like a thick velvet curtain. Emily Carter Romano woke on the left side of the California king bed, her hand automatically reaching across the expanse of cold, high-thread count Egyptian cotton sheets. Her fingers brushed against nothing but undisturbed silk. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. The master bedroom was a masterpiece of interior design, a spread from a luxury magazine brought to life. The walls were painted a storm cloud gray. The furniture was mahogany imported from Italy, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Riverton City waking up below. It was beautiful. It was breathtaking. And it felt about as much like a home as a museum exhibit behind velvet ropes. Emily sat up, pulling the duvet against her chest against the chill of the air conditioning. She glanced at the digital clock on the bedside table. It was 8 a.m. She picked up her phone, the screen lighting up her pale face. No messages, no missed calls. Dante had promised, the night before. His voice had been low and rough against her ear, promising he would be back before sunrise, that he would wake up beside her. But the other side of the bed was pristine, a stark reminder that Dante Romano belonged to the city and its shadows just as much as, if not more than, he belonged to her. She swung her legs out of bed, her bare feet sinking into the plush cream carpet. Walking to the window, she looked down at the sprawling metropolis. From this height, the cars were just toys, the people invisible specks. This was her life now. She was the queen of Riverton, high in her tower, safe, protected, and utterly alone. Emily pressed her hand against the cold glass. She missed the noise of her old apartment. She missed the drafty windows and the neighbors arguing in the hallway. She missed feeling like a person who existed in the world, rather than a prized possession stored away in a vault. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was decidedly less sterile. The back room of La Duca, an exclusive Italian restaurant that had been in the Romano family for 3 generations, smelled of espresso, old leather, and fear. Dante Romano sat at the head of a long oak table. He did not look like a man who had been up all night. He looked immaculate. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, hugging broad shoulders that carried the weight of a criminal empire without slumping. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that could have been carved from granite, handsome in a way that made people stop and stare, and dangerous in a way that made them look down immediately after. Across from him sat 3 men who ran the local dockworkers' union. They were sweating. Dante was not. "I am not asking for a favor," Dante said, his voice smooth, barely rising above a conversational volume. "I am telling you that the shipment coming in on Tuesday will bypass the usual inspection. The surcharge you are suggesting is insulting, not because of the money. You know I have the money. It is insulting because it suggests you think I am a tourist in my own city." The lead union representative, a heavy-set man named Miller, wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "We just mean, Mr. Romano, the scrutiny is higher lately. The feds are everywhere. We take a risk moving your product. We need 20%. Dante smiled. It was a terrifying expression because it did not reach his eyes. His eyes remained cold, calculating, devoid of mercy. 10%, Dante said, and you will take it because the alternative is that I replace you with men who understand loyalty. And I think we all know that the retirement plan for your position is usually quite abrupt." The silence that followed stretched tight, snapping only when Miller nodded vigorously. 10%, yes, of course. "Mr. Romano." Dante stood up. The meeting was over. The men scrambled to leave, their relief palpable as they exited the room. As the door clicked shut, the air in the room shifted. Nico, Dante's lieutenant and oldest friend, stepped out from the shadows of the corner where he had been leaning against the wall. Nico was leaner than Dante, with a scar running through his left eyebrow and a permanent expression of wariness. "That went well," Nico said, pouring himself a glass of water. Dante adjusted his cufflinks. He was tired. The bone-deep exhaustion was creeping in behind his eyes. but he pushed it down. Weakness was death in this room. They are scared, Dante replied. Fear is a useful currency, but it burns out if you do not maintain it. What is the update on the warehouse? Nico hesitated. It was a fraction of a second, but Dante saw it. He turned slowly to face his lieutenant. Nico, there is chatter, Nico said, his voice dropping. Low-level stuff, but persistent. Someone is talking. Dante, someone close to the inner circle knows about the route changes before we even finalize them. We might have a leak. Dante's jaw tightened. A leak meant betrayal. Betrayal meant blood. He thought of the empire his father had built, the one he had expanded and fortified. He thought of the enemies waiting for a single crack in the armor to stick a knife in. Find it, Dante ordered, his tone icy. Plug it. I do not care who it is. If they are selling us out, they are done. Nico nodded grimly. I am on it. Go home, boss. You look like you need to sleep for a week. Dante checked his watch. He had missed the morning. He had missed waking up with Emily. The guilt hit him harder than the fatigue. He was doing this for her, or so he told himself. He was building a fortress so high no one could touch her, but every brick he laid seemed to build the wall between them a little higher, too. I have the charity gala tonight, Dante said, buttoning his jacket. I need to go home and change. The sun had begun to dip toward the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the penthouse bedroom. Emily stood in front of the full-length mirror in her dressing room. The room was larger than the entire ground floor of her childhood home, filled with racks of designer clothes Dante had bought for her, gowns of silk, velvet, and chiffon, modest, elegant, and perfectly fitting for the wife of a powerful businessman. But tonight, Emily did not want to be the elegant, silent wife. She reached into the back of the closet, past the floor-length gowns in navy and emerald, and pulled out a garment bag she had bought herself 2 days ago. She unzipped it and let the black fabric fall. It was a cocktail dress. It was not modest. The dress was black, simple, and devastating. It had thin spaghetti straps and a neckline that dipped low enough to be interesting but high enough to keep a secret. But it was the hemline that made her heart race. It stopped mid-thigh, inches above her knees. It was tight, hugging her waist and hips like a second skin. Emily shed her silk robe and stepped into the dress. She pulled the zipper up, the sound loud in the quiet room. She turned to the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked different. She did not look like Mrs. Romano, the shy girl from the small town who had been swept off her feet by the dark, mysterious billionaire. She looked like Emily. She looked dangerous. She looked alive. For the last year, she had worn what was expected of her. She had smiled when she was told to smile, stood where she was placed, and faded into the background while Dante commanded the room. She felt like she was disappearing, dissolving into the gold leaf and marble of his world. Tonight. She wanted to be seen. She smoothed her hands over her hips, feeling the shape of her own body. Her legs were bare, long and pale against the dark fabric. She slipped on a pair of black stilettos that added 4 inches to her height and accentuated the curve of her calves. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Dante would hate it. She knew he would. He preferred her covered, protected, kept for his eyes only. The thought made a spark of rebellion flare in her chest. Let him hate it. Let him feel something other than that distant, distracted affection he had been giving her lately. She applied a coat of deep red lipstick, blotting it carefully. She was ready. The sound of the heavy front door opening echoed through the penthouse. Emily froze. He was early. He was never early. She heard his heavy footsteps crossing the marble foyer, the familiar rhythm of his gait. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. She would not hide. She would not change. Emily? Dante's voice carried through the hallway, deep and rough with exhaustion. I am in the bedroom, she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. She heard him approach, the footsteps muffled as he hit the carpet of the master suite. Emily turned away from the mirror to face the open doorway of the dressing room. Dante appeared in the frame. He had shed his suit jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar. tie loose. He looked weary. Lines of tension etched around his eyes and mouth. He looked like a man carrying the world on his back. He looked up, ready to greet her with a tired smile, perhaps a standardized apology for missing the morning. Then he saw her. Dante stopped dead. His hand, which had been reaching up to rub the back of his neck, froze in midair. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. His eyes, dark as espresso, swept over her. They started at her face, dropped to the neckline of the dress, traveled over the curve of her waist, and landed on her legs. His gaze lingered on her exposed thighs, on the skin that was usually hidden from the world. Emily watched the transformation. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp alertness. His pupils dilated, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. The expression that settled on his face was a volatile cocktail of shock, hunger, and a darkening, thunderous suspicion. He did not smile. He did not tell her she looked beautiful. He walked into the room. He moved slowly now, like a predator stalking prey, every step deliberate. The casual menace he had worn in the meeting with the union leaders returned, but this time it was personal. Dante stopped a foot away from her. He was so close she could smell the scent of him. Sandalwood, rain, and the faint, bitter tang of cigar smoke. He towered over her, his presence consuming the oxygen in the room. His voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, vibrating in his chest. It was edged with a jealousy so sharp it could cut glass. "Who are you trying to impress?" he asked. The question hung in the air between them. It was not a question. It was an accusation. Emily lifted her chin, refusing to back down. "I am going to a gala. Dante, I am trying to look nice." Dante's eyes narrowed. He reached out, his large hand brushing the hem of the dress where it rested against her thigh. His fingers were hot against her skin, the touch possessive, claiming it was a touch that said, "Mine." "Nice?" he repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "You are practically naked." "Emily, this is not a dress for a wife. This is a dress for a woman who wants attention." He stepped closer, invading her personal space until her back was nearly against the dressing table. "Is that it?" he murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Are you bored, Emily? Do you want every man in that ballroom staring at you? Do you want them imagining what is underneath this scrap of fabric?" Emily felt a flush of heat rise up her neck, born of anger and humiliation, stung by his words. She pushed his hand away. "Stop it," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Stop looking at me like I have committed a crime. I am your wife, Dante, not your prisoner. I'm tired of being treated like a porcelain doll that you keep on a shelf." Dante's eyes flashed. "I treat you like a queen. I give you everything. You give me things," Emily cried out, the frustration of months finally boiling over. "You give me clothes and jewelry in this cold, empty apartment. You lock me away in here while you go out and do God knows what. I want to breathe. Dante, I want to feel confident. I want to feel alive." "Alive?" Dante laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You think walking into a room full of sharks with your legs on display makes you feel alive. It makes you a target. Emily," he gestured violently toward the window, toward the city below. "You have no idea what is out there. You have no idea how men think. They will look at you, and they will see a weakness. They will see something they can take to get to me. You are not just wearing a dress. You are painting a bullseye on your back." Emily stepped forward, closing the gap he had created. "Then maybe the problem is not the dress," she shouted. "Maybe the problem is your world. You use danger as an excuse for everything. You control where I go, who I see. And now you want to control what I wear? I am not a weakness. Dante, I am a person." Dante's composure snapped. The fear that had been gnawing at him since Nico's warning about the leak, the paranoia that had been his constant companion since childhood, roared to the surface. He saw her so beautiful, so fragile, so exposed, and the thought of anyone else looking at her, anyone else touching her, blinded him. He grabbed her wrist. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to hold on to her, to keep her safe, to keep her his. His grip was tight, his fingers circling the delicate bones of her wrist. Emily gasped, her eyes widening in shock. For a heartbeat, time suspended. They stared at each other, breathing heavily, the silence screaming with unsaid words. Then, Dante looked down at his hand on her wrist. He saw the way her skin pressed white under his fingers. Horror washed over his face. He released her instantly, as if her skin had burned him. He stepped back, his hands hovering in the air, trembling slightly. Dante's voice broke. It was a hoarse, fractured sound. "I am sorry. Emily, I did not mean to—" He looked at her, his eyes wide and vulnerable, the mask of the Mafia boss crumbling to reveal the terrified man underneath. Emily rubbed her wrist. He hadn't hurt her. Not really, but the violence of the action hung between them. She looked at him and saw the fear in his eyes. She saw the desperation. He wasn't trying to control her because he hated her. He was trying to control her because he loved her so much it was driving him mad. The anger drained out of her, replaced by a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. "Dante," she whispered. He closed his eyes, taking a ragged breath. "I cannot have them looking at you," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I cannot stand it. The thought of anyone else seeing you like this. It kills me." The raw honesty of the words pulled at something deep inside her. The tension in the room shifted. It was no longer the tension of a fight. It was the tension of a wire pulled so tight it was about to sing. Dante opened his eyes. He reached out again, but this time, his movement was slow, reverent. He cupped her face in his large, warm hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. "You are mine," he whispered, the words sounding like a prayer and a plea. He didn't wait for an answer. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was fierce. It was a collision of anger, fear, and desire. He kissed her as if he were trying to breathe for her, as if he could imprint his soul onto hers and keep the rest of the world away. Emily made a soft sound in her throat and melted into him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. She kissed him back with equal force, pouring all her frustration and loneliness into the contact. Dante groaned low in his chest. He moved his hands from her face to her waist, pulling her flush against him. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the rapid beating of his heart matching her own. He walked her backward, his movements urgent but controlled, until her back hit the wall next to the closet. He didn't stop kissing her. His hands roamed over her back, splayed wide over the silk of the dress, pressing her closer as if he could merge their bodies into one. Emily clutched the lapels of his suit, pulling him harder against her. The smell of him surrounded her, intoxicating and overwhelming. This was the Dante she knew, the man who burned for her, the man who made the rest of the world fade away. His jealousy was still there. She could taste it, but it was melting, transforming into raw, unfiltered need. He broke the kiss, gasping for air, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were dark, burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I do not want to share you," he rasped, his hand sliding down to grip her hips, hiking the short dress up an inch higher. "Not with the world, not with anyone." "Then don't," Emily whispered, looking up at him through her lashes. Dante let out a ragged breath. He swept her up into his arms, lifting her effortlessly. Emily wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in the crook of his neck. He carried her out of the dressing room and into the bedroom. The bed, with its cold, perfect sheets, was waiting. Dante lowered her onto the mattress, following her down. The expensive duvet bunched beneath them as they tumbled together, limbs tangling, the tension of the argument, the fear of the leak, the coldness of the penthouse. It all receded to the background. Emily laughed, a breathless, surprised sound as Dante hovered over her, his weight pressing her into the mattress. It was a release, a crack of light in the darkness. Dante looked down at her. His hair was messy, his lips swollen, his tie askew. He looked wild. He looked at her as if she were the only source of light in his dark, violent world. He brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his touch agonizingly gentle now. "For tonight," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "You impress only me." Emily reached up, pulling him down to her. "Just you," she promised. As they moved together, the shadows of the room seemed to lengthen, wrapping around them. The passion was real, the connection electric and undeniable. But beneath the surface, beneath the heat of their skin and the desperate cadence of their breath, the cracks remained. The world outside the window was still dangerous, the secrets were still kept, and the question of who Emily was, the wife in the tower or the woman in the short dress, remained unanswered, buried for now under the weight of a love that felt dangerously like a cage. The morning sun that filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse was not warm. It was bright, clinical, and unforgiving. Emily Carter Romano stirred, her body heavy with the remnants of sleep and the physical memory of the night before. She reached out instinctively, her hand seeking the solid warmth of Dante's shoulder. But for the second morning in a row, her fingers met only the cool, crisp texture of high thread count sheets. She opened her eyes, blinking against the glare. The space beside her was empty. The pillow was perfectly fluffed, as if he had never been there at all, erasing the evidence of the chaotic, desperate passion they had shared just hours ago. Emily sat up, pulling the sheet against her chest. On the mahogany nightstand, anchored by his heavy gold watch, sat a piece of thick, cream-colored stationery. She picked it up. Dante's handwriting was like the man himself, sharp, jagged, and aggressively assertive. "Be careful today. I will see you at the gala. Wear the jewelry I left in the safe." There was no signature. There was no "I love you." Just an order disguised as concern and a directive for her appearance. Emily traced the ink with her thumb, a bitter taste settling in the back of her throat. Last night, amidst the tangled sheets and breathless whispers, she had thought they had broken through something. She had thought the wall between them had crumbled. But looking at the note, she realized the wall was still there. They had simply climbed over it for a few hours before retreating to their respective sides. She was not sure if their argument had been resolved or just buried under the weight of their physical need for each other. 2 hours later, the atmosphere was drastically different. The Golden Spoon was a trendy bistro in the heart of Riverton's fashion district, alive with the sound of clinking silverware and chatter. Lily, Emily's best friend from before the marriage, sat across from her, waving a mimosa in the air like a conductor's baton. Lily was everything Emily currently felt she was not: loud, colorful, and unapologetically free. "So let me get this straight," Lily said, leaning over her avocado toast. "He comes home, sees you looking like a supermodel, gets jealous, yells at you, and then you guys sleep together, and now you are confused? Honey, that is not a marriage. That is a telenovela episode." Emily swirled her herbal tea, looking down at the table. "It is not that simple. Lily, he's under a lot of pressure. He worries about me." Lily raised an eyebrow, a skeptical arch that spoke volumes. "There is worrying and then there is controlling," Lily said, her voice dropping to a serious tone. "Emily, look at you. You used to be the girl who backpacked through Europe with $40 and a ham sandwich. Now you ask permission to leave your house? You are living in a gilded cage, a very expensive, very beautiful cage, but it still has bars." "He loves me," Emily said softly, though the defense felt flimsy even to her own ears. "I know he does." Lily sighed, softening. "But love and control are not the same thing. You are losing yourself. Em, you are fading into the background of his life. You need something for yourself, a real life, something that does not have the name Romano attached to it." Lily's words echoed in Emily's mind long after brunch ended. A real life. She did not go straight home. Instead, she told her driver to drop her off at the edge of the arts district, claiming she wanted to walk and shop for a gift. As the black sedan pulled away, Emily felt a thrill of illicit freedom. She walked past the high-end galleries with their locked doors and appointment-only policies, heading toward a smaller, older brick building on the corner. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "The Canvas Collective." Emily pushed the door open. A bell jingled cheerfully. The air inside smelled of turpentine, old paper, and coffee. It was messy, cluttered, and wonderfully imperfect. "Can I help you?" a voice called out. A man emerged from the back room, wiping paint-stained hands on a rag. He was tall, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that had seen better days. He looked nothing like the men in Dante's world. He looked safe. "I saw the sign in the window," Emily said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The one about help wanted?" The man smiled, and it reached his eyes instantly. "I am Alex, the owner. And yes, I am desperate. I am great at painting, but I am terrible at organizing. Do you have any experience?" "I have an art history degree," Emily said, realizing how long it had been since she had said that out loud. "And I have an eye for detail." Alex looked at her. Really looked at her, not assessing her value or her threat level, but just seeing a person. "You are hired," he said with a laugh. "What is your name?" Emily hesitated. If she said Romano, everything would change. The walls would go up. "Emily," she said. "Emily Carter. Welcome aboard." "Emily Carter," Alex said, extending a hand. Shaking it felt like sealing a pact with a past version of herself. She walked out of the shop 20 minutes later with a flexible schedule, a meager hourly wage that wouldn't cover the cost of her manicure, and a secret that made her feel more alive than she had in months. The sun had set by the time Dante's car idled in the private driveway of the penthouse building. He texted her that he was downstairs. Emily took one last look in the mirror. She had followed his instructions regarding the jewelry, a diamond necklace that felt heavy and cold against her collarbone, but she had made her own choice with the dress. It was a deep midnight blue, floor-length, but the fabric was liquid silk that clung to every curve of her body, and the back dipped low. It was elegant, but it was not modest. When she stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, Dante was waiting. He was talking on his phone, his brow furrowed, but he hung up the moment he saw her. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like armor, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders. He watched her approach, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. Emily braced herself for a critique, for a comment about the dress being too tight or the back being too low. Instead, Dante let out a slow breath. "You look beautiful," he said. His tone was guarded, tight. It was the sound of a man restraining himself. He offered her his arm, and as she took it, she felt the tension radiating off him. He was still wrestling with the jealousy from the night before, fighting a war between his pride and his possessiveness. "Shall we?" he asked. "We shall," she replied, squeezing his arm gently. The charity gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. It was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, a convergence of Riverton City's elite. Politicians shook hands with real estate moguls, tech billionaires laughed with old money heirs. And weaving through it all, like sharks in a koi pond, were men like Dante, powerful, dangerous, and accepted because their money was just as green as everyone else's. Dante moved through the room like a king holding court. People parted for him. Men shook his hand with too much enthusiasm. Women looked at him with lingering gazes that made Emily's stomach turn. She was introduced a dozen times in the first hour. "This is my wife, Mrs. Romano. Pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Romano. Lovely dress, Mrs. Romano." She was an accessory, a beautiful, silent ornament hanging on the arm of the most powerful man in the room. Her identity, her thoughts, her humor. None of it mattered. She was just an extension of Dante. "I'm going to get a drink," Dante said after an hour of networking. "Stay here. Do not wander off." He did not ask. He commanded. Before Emily could object, he had disappeared into the crowd toward the bar. Emily let out a sigh, her shoulders slumping slightly. She turned away from the crushing crowd, looking for a quiet corner to breathe. She spotted a partition near the side entrance of the ballroom where a small art display had been set up for the silent auction. She walked toward it, drawn by the splash of color in the monochrome room. As she admired a modern abstract piece, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. I think the artist was trying to capture the feeling of rush hour traffic, but he mostly just captured a headache. Emily spun around. Alex was standing there, holding a tray of champagne flutes. He was wearing a server's uniform, a white shirt and black vest, and he looked out of place and entirely comfortable at the same time. "Alex!" she exclaimed, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "Emily!" Alex grinned. "I didn't know you ran in these circles. I am catering the display. The gallery does not exactly pay the bills on its own yet. Yes. My husband is a donor," Emily said, stumbling slightly over the truth. They fell into an easy conversation. For the first time all evening, Emily felt her shoulders relax. They talked about the paintings, about the ridiculousness of the centerpieces, about nothing important. She laughed at a joke he made about a sculpture that looked like a melted shoe. The music in the ballroom swelled, a crescendo of violins making it hard to hear. "Sorry." "What?" Emily asked, leaning in. Alex stepped closer, his demeanor entirely innocent. He reached out, his hand resting lightly on her elbow to steady himself as he leaned down to speak near her ear. "I said, I think that sculpture is actually worth more than my car." He laughed. The contact was brief, casual, and friendly, but across the room, it was viewed through a very different lens. Dante had been returning with 2 glasses of champagne when he saw it. He saw the man in the vest. He saw the man leaning close to his wife. He saw the man's hand touching Emily's bare skin. The glass in Dante's right hand shattered. Champagne and shards of crystal exploded onto the floor. Nearby guests gasped and jumped back. Dante did not even look down at his bleeding hand. His eyes were locked on Alex. He moved. He did not run, but his stride was long and devouring. He cut through the crowd, a dark force of nature parting the sea of guests. Emily felt the shift in the air before she saw him. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. She turned just as Dante materialized beside her. He did not speak to her. He did not look at her. He stepped directly between her and Alex, effectively blocking the gallery owner from her view. He wrapped his uninjured arm around Emily's waist, pulling her hard against his side. His grip was iron. "And who is this?" Dante asked. His voice was polite, smooth, and utterly terrifying. It was the voice he used before he ordered a hit. Alex, sensing the sudden drop in temperature, took a step back, his eyes widening. I'm Alex," he stammered. I know Emily from—" Dante cut him off. He smiled, but it was a baring of teeth. "Mrs. Romano," Dante corrected him, the ice in his tone thick enough to freeze the champagne in the glasses on Alex's tray. "You know, Mrs. Romano." "Yes. Right. Mrs. Romano," Alex said, swallowing hard. "I was just discussing the art." Dante stared at him for a long, agonizing second. I see. Well, the art is lovely, but my wife and I were just leaving." He turned his head to look at Emily, his eyes dark and empty. "We're sitting down for dinner. Emily, now." He steered her away, his hand never leaving her waist. Emily looked back apologetically at Alex, who looked like he had just encountered a tiger in a tuxedo. They sat at their assigned table near the front. Dante sat closely beside her. He took a napkin and wrapped it around his bleeding hand, indifferent to the pain, under the table. His left hand found her thigh. It was not a caress. His fingers drummed a frantic, tense rhythm against the silk of her dress. Tap, tap, tap. It was the heartbeat of a bomb waiting to go off. The ride home was silent. The silence was not the velvet of the morning. It was the suffocating pressure of the deep ocean. The moment the penthouse door clicked shut, the explosion happened. "Who is he?" Dante roared, spinning around to face her. "He is nobody," Emily shouted back, throwing her clutch onto the sofa. "He is a guy I met. Why do you have to ruin everything? You let him touch you." Dante paced the room, running his hand through his hair. "I saw him. Emily leaning in, whispering to you, putting his hands on you like he knows you. He touched my elbow because the music was loud." Emily screamed, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "You are crazy, Dante! You are paranoid and crazy. I have to be," he yelled, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "Do you think this is a game? Do you think the people in that room are your friends? They are vultures. And that boy, who is he? How do you know him?" You said you met him. Where? When? Emily froze. She saw the trap closing. I met him today, she stammered. Where? Dante demanded, stopping his pacing. He stalked toward her. Where did you go today? Emily, you said you went shopping. I got a job, she blurted out. The silence that followed was absolute. Dante stopped 3 feet away from her. He looked as if she had slapped him. What? He whispered. I got a job, Emily said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. At a gallery. The Canvas Collective. Alex is the owner. I use my maiden name. I start on Monday. Dante stared at her, his expression fracturing. Betrayal washed over his features, stark and painful. You lied to me, he said, his voice hollow. You went out, used a fake name, and got a job with another man without telling me? I didn't tell you because I knew you would do this. Emily gestured wildly at him. I knew you would forbid it. I need a life. Dante, I need something that is mine. I cannot just be your wife. Sitting in this tower, waiting for you to come home and tell me I am pretty. You are not safe out there, Dante roared, the anger returning with a vengeance. Do you understand who I am? Do you understand who my enemies are? They will use anyone to get to me. And now you have given them a gift, a routine, a workplace, a male friend they can leverage. Stop using your enemies as an excuse to control me, Emily cried, stepping toward him, her finger pointing at his chest. You keep me in the dark. You never tell me what is really going on. You just give me half-truths and orders. Be careful today. Wear this jewelry. Don't talk to him. I am your wife, Dante, not your employee. I do it to protect you. Dante grabbed her shoulders, shaking her slightly. 'Cause I love you. Then trust me, Emily sobbed, the fight draining out of her as the tears finally spilled over. Trust me enough to tell me the truth. Trust me enough to let me live. She broke down, her body shaking with the force of her weeping. The anger, the fear, the loneliness of the past months all poured out. Dante watched her crumble. The rage in his eyes flickered and died, extinguished by the sight of her pain. He looked at his hands on her shoulders, hands that had hurt people, hands that were currently stained with his own dried blood, and he hated himself. Emily. He choked out. He pulled her into him. It wasn't sexual. It was desperate. He wrapped his arms around her, crushing her against his chest. Emily didn't fight him. She clung to his lapels, burying her face in his shirt, sobbing into the expensive fabric. I am sorry, he whispered into her hair. I am sorry, baby. I am so sorry. He lifted her up, carrying her not to the bed to ravish her, but to sit on the edge of the mattress. He sat beside her, pulling her into his lap. He rocked her gently, his hand rubbing slow, soothing circles on her back. They sat there for a long time, the only sound in the penthouse, the sound of her ragged breathing quieting down. Dante kissed her hairline, his lips lingering against her skin. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper in the dark room. I don't know how to be a normal husband. I look at the world, and all I see are threats. All I see are things that want to take you away from me. He pulled back slightly to look at her. His eyes were red-rimmed, stripped of their usual armor. Keeping you safe is the only thing that makes sense to me, Emily. It is the only thing I know how to do. If I lock you away, it is because I am terrified that if I let you go, you won't come back. Or worse, someone will stop you from coming back. Emily looked at him. Seeing the boy who had lost his father to violence, the man who had built an empire on fear because he had been so afraid himself. She reached up, touching his face. I am here. Dante, she whispered. I am right here, but you have to let me breathe, or we are both going to suffocate. Dante closed his eyes, leaning his cheek into her palm. He didn't say yes. He didn't promise to let her keep the job, but he didn't let go of her either. He just held her tighter, as if by holding her, he could keep the rest of the world at bay for one more night. The air inside the abandoned textile warehouse in the industrial district of Riverton City was stale, smelling of rusted iron and damp concrete. It was a place where light went to die, swallowed by the shadows that stretched between the towering, empty shelves. Dante Romano stood in the center of the vast space, the single overhead halogen bulb casting harsh angles across his face. He did not look like a man who had slept. The circles under his eyes were dark bruises against his pale skin, and his hands, usually steady as stone, were clenched into fists at his sides. Marco, his cousin and a man whose ambition often outpaced his wisdom, leaned against a forklift, chewing on a toothpick. Nico stood closer to Dante, his posture rigid, a notebook in his hand. "They are asking," Nico said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Who is asking?" Dante demanded. His voice was not loud, but it carried a vibration that made Marco stop chewing. "The Sullivans," Nico replied, naming the rival syndicate that had been clawing at the edges of Romano territory for months, specifically their mid-level guys. "They're not asking about shipments, Dante. They're not asking about the docks. They're asking about her." Dante felt a cold spike drive itself into the base of his spine. It was the specific, nauseating sensation of his worst nightmare manifesting in the waking world. Since the gala, since the moment he had lost his temper and claimed Emily with a violence that drew every eye in the room. He had known this was coming. He had painted a target on her back, just as he had warned her he would. "What are they asking?" Dante asked, the words grinding out through his teeth. "Descriptions," Marco piped up, finally pushing off the forklift. "Where she shops, what she drives. If she has a routine. They smell blood in the water. Cousin, they think you have gone soft because you got married. They think she is the way in." Dante turned on Marco so fast that his cousin flinched. "I have not gone soft," Dante hissed, stepping into Marco's personal space until the younger man had to look up. "I have something to lose. There is a difference." He turned back to Nico, pacing a tight circle on the dusty concrete. "Expand the perimeter," Dante ordered. "I want 3 men on the penthouse lobby, not 2. I want a tail on her every time she leaves the building. But they must be ghosts. If she sees them, she will fight me, and I cannot fight her and the Sullivans at the same time." "And the gallery?" Nico asked quietly. "You let her go today." Dante stopped pacing. He stared at the ground, his jaw working. He had let her go because the alternative was watching the light die in her eyes completely. He had let her go because her tears the night before had broken something in him that anger could not fix. "She goes to the gallery," Dante said, "the decision tasting like bile. But you put a man across the street. You put a man in the coffee shop next door. No one approaches her without my knowledge. No one breathes in her direction without me knowing what they ate for breakfast. Do you understand?" "Understood," Nico said. Dante looked up at the high, darkened windows of the warehouse. He felt exposed, stripped of the armor of invulnerability he had worn for a decade. He had spent his life building a fortress, and now he realized he had left the gate unlocked the moment he fell in love. 5 miles away, the sunlight streaming through the front window of the Canvas Collective felt like a benediction. Emily hummed softly to herself as she adjusted a landscape painting on the western wall. The gallery was quiet, a peaceful sanctuary of color and creativity that felt a world away from the marble coldness of the penthouse. It was her first official day. She wore a simple white blouse and trousers, her hair tied back in a messy bun, a smudge of dust already on her cheek. She felt ridiculous for being so happy about manual labor. But for the first time in months, she was not Mrs. Romano. She was just Emily. Alex was in the back room framing a new acquisition, leaving Emily to manage the floor. She had greeted 3 customers so far, a college student looking for inspiration, an elderly couple who bought a ceramic bowl, and a tourist asking for directions. Every interaction felt like a victory, a reclaiming of the social skills she thought had atrophied. She stepped back to admire her work with the landscape, wiping her hands on her pants. "You have a good eye," a voice said from behind her. Emily turned with a smile. A man was standing near the entrance, looking at a sculpture. He was average height, wearing a nondescript gray jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He was quiet, blending so perfectly into the background that she hadn't heard the bell chime when he entered. "Thank you," Emily said brightly. "The light hits the oils better on this wall. I think—" The man nodded, turning his gaze from the sculpture to her. His eyes were flat, unreadable. "You work here every day?" he asked. It was a casual question, the kind of small talk anyone might make, but something about the way he stood, still, watchful, like a hunter in a blind, made a tiny alarm bell ring in the back of Emily's mind. She silenced it quickly. She was just being paranoid, infected by Dante's worldview. "Just part-time," she answered, keeping her tone light. "Mondays and Wednesdays for now." "Mondays and Wednesdays," the man repeated. "Good to know. Hard to find good help these days. You live around here?" Emily hesitated. The alarm bell rang louder. "Not far," she said vaguely. "Are you interested in the sculpture? It is by a local artist." The man smiled, but it was a quick, thin expression that vanished as fast as it appeared. "Just looking." He said, "Just seeing what is available." He lingered for another minute, his gaze drifting around the shop, noting the exits, the lack of security cameras, the single employee in the back room. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Emily watched him go, a shiver running down her arms despite the warmth of the day. She shook it off, telling herself she was being ridiculous, and turned back to the painting. Outside. The man in the gray jacket walked half a block down the street and slid into the passenger seat of a waiting sedan. He pulled a burner phone from his pocket and dialed a number. "It is confirmed," he said into the receiver. "She is there. Mondays and Wednesdays. No bodyguards visible. Just her and a hipster owner." A pause as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Yeah," the man said, looking back toward the gallery. "She's pretty. Looks soft. It will be easy. Like picking a flower." That evening, the penthouse was transformed. When Emily arrived home, tired but buzzing with a sense of accomplishment, she found the lights dimmed. Dozens of candles flickered on the dining table and out on the balcony, their flames dancing against the backdrop of the city's skyline. The scent of roasted rosemary and garlic filled the air, replacing the usual sterile smell of lemon polish. Dante emerged from the kitchen. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing the strong, corded muscles of his forearms. He held a bottle of wine in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. "Welcome home," he said. He sounded tentative, almost shy. It was a side of him she rarely saw. "Dante," Emily said, dropping her bag on the bench, "what is all this?" "I gave the staff the night off," he said, pouring the wine. I wanted to hear about your day." Emily walked over to him, accepting the glass. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the effort he was making. He was trying to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. "My day was good," she said softly. "Really good." They sat on the balcony, the city humming below them. The chef had prepared a rustic pasta dish, simple and hearty, the kind of food Emily used to love before her life became a series of 5-course galas. Dante ate slowly, watching her. He seemed to be searching for words, struggling to navigate a conversation that didn't involve threats, negotiations, or orders. "So," he started, clearing his throat, "the gallery, did you enjoy the work?" "I did," Emily said, her face lighting up. "I reorganized the entire west wall. Alex let me handle the customers. It felt good. Dante, to be useful. To talk to people who didn't know who I was." Dante's hand tightened slightly on his wineglass at the mention of customers, but he forced himself to relax. "And the people?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "They were polite? No one bothered you?" "They were fine," Emily said, in taking a sip of wine. "Just normal people. One guy was a little quiet, asked about my schedule, but he was harmless." Dante stopped chewing. His heart missed a beat. "He asked about your schedule?" Dante asked, his voice dropping an octave. Emily sensed the shift immediately and regretted mentioning it. "Just making conversation. Dante, he was just a customer. Please, don't start." Dante forced a smile, though it looked painful. "I am not starting. I am just listening. I am glad you had a good day." He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, and engulfing. "I want you to be happy." "Emily," he said, and the raw sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. "I know I make it hard sometimes. I know I am. Difficult." Emily squeezed his hand. You are not difficult. You are just complicated." Dante let out a short, dry laugh. He looked out at the city, his expression darkening as he journeyed into a memory he rarely touched. "My father was a complicated man," he said quietly. "He thought he could keep the business and his family in separate boxes. He thought if he was ruthless enough out there, he could be gentle at home." Emily stayed silent, knowing this was a door opening that had been locked for a long time. "He was killed when I was 12, Dante continued, his eyes unfocused. "A rival family wanted his territory. They knew they couldn't get to him directly. He was too guarded, so they waited until my mother took me to school. They used us to draw him out." He turned his gaze back to Emily. His eyes were pools of ancient grief. "He died in the street. Emily, trying to get to us. I watched it happen from the back seat of the car. That was the day I learned the lesson." "What lesson?" Emily whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "That love is a breach," Dante said, his voice trembling. "It is a crack in the wall. Enemies do not fight you fair. They find the thing you love, and they squeeze it until you break. I grew up promising myself I would never have a crack in my wall. I would never give anyone that power over me." He looked at her, and the vulnerability on his face was devastating. "And then I met you," he said simply, "and the wall didn't just crack. It shattered." Emily felt a tear slide down her cheek. She stood up and walked around the table. Dante stood to meet her. She didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face in his chest. Dante let out a shuddering breath and held her. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a world of smoke and mirrors. "I am not going anywhere," Emily murmured into his shirt. They stood there for a long time, swaying slightly to music that only they could hear. The city lights blurred into a backdrop of diamonds on velvet. Dante moved one hand to the small of her back, guiding her into a slow, rhythmic dance. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered into her hair. "I don't want to lose you the way I lost him. You won't." She promised. The mood shifted, deepening from sorrow into something warmer, heavier. Dante pulled back just enough to look at her. The grief in his eyes was being replaced by heat. He leaned down and kissed her, soft at first, a tasting of the wine on her lips, then deeper, hungrier. They moved inside, stumbling slightly as they navigated the transition from the balcony to the living room. They collapsed onto the plush velvet sofa. Emily climbed into his lap, straddling him, her dress riding up her thighs. Dante groaned, his hands sliding up her legs, tracing the soft skin, the friction of the day, the fear, the arguments. It all fueled the fire. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her neck, his hands finding the zipper of her dress. "So beautiful it hurts." Emily tipped her head back, her hands tangling in his dark hair. She felt cherished. She felt seen. For the first time in their marriage, she felt like she understood the fear that drove him, and she wanted to burn it away with her touch. Their breathing grew uneven, ragged gasps filling the quiet room. Dante's hands were everywhere, possessing, worshipping. He kissed the hollow of her throat, his stubble grazing her sensitive skin, sending shivers down her spine. "This is it," Emily thought dizzily. "This is us. No walls, no secrets. Buzz." The sound was small, but in the charged silence, it sounded like a gunshot. Dante's phone, left on the coffee table, vibrated against the glass. He ignored it. He kissed her shoulder, his hand sliding higher on her thigh. "Buzz, buzz." Dante stiffened. He tried to stay in the moment, tried to stay with Emily, but the rhythm of the vibration was insistent, urgent. Emily pulled back slightly, breathless, her lips swollen. "Dante," she whispered. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, a look of pure frustration contorting his features. He let out a curse, low and vicious. He pulled his hands away from her. The loss of contact was physical, a sudden coldness where there had been fire. "I am sorry," he rasped. His voice was rough, strained. I have to take this. It is the emergency line." He stood up, his fingers lingering on her hip for one last, desperate second before he pulled away completely. "We will finish this later," he promised, his eyes burning with unspent desire. I promise." He grabbed the phone and stepped out onto the balcony, sliding the glass door shut behind him. Emily sat alone on the couch, her skin still tingling, her heart racing. She straightened her dress, trying to compose herself. She watched Dante through the glass. He answered the phone. She saw his posture change instantly. The lover vanished. The vulnerable boy who had lost his father vanished. In their place stood the Don, his shoulders squared, his hand gripping the balcony railing until his knuckles turned white. On the balcony, the cool night air did nothing to cool Dante's blood. "Talk to me," Dante said into the phone. "It is confirmed," Nico's voice said, tight and fast. "We pulled the security footage from the shop across the street from the gallery. We ran facial recognition. The guy in the gray jacket? The one Emily talked to?" Dante closed his eyes. He knew. He felt it in his gut. "Tell me," Dante commanded. "Local scout for the Sullivans." Nico said, "Name is Kovich. Low level, but he reports directly to their enforcer. He was clocking her." "Dante. He was checking the exits. He knows she is there. He knows she is alone." Dante felt the world tilt. The image of the warehouse, the memory of his father dying on the pavement, the look on Emily's face when she talked about the quiet man. It all collided in a violent crash of realization. She was not safe. He had been a fool to think he could let her have this. He had been a fool to think he could balance her happiness against her survival. "Pull the team," Dante said, his voice dead. "What?" Nico asked. "I said pull the team. She's not going back." Dante hung up. He stood there for a moment, staring at the city that wanted to eat him alive. He hated the Sullivans. He hated the life. But mostly, in that moment, he hated that he was right. He slid the glass door open and stepped back inside. Emily looked up from the couch, a smile ready on her lips, expecting him to come back to her, to resume what they had started. Then she saw his face. The warmth drained out of the room instantly. Dante looked like a statue carved from ice. "What is it?" Emily asked, her smile faltering. "Is everything okay? You cannot go back," Dante said. He didn't mean to say it so bluntly. He wanted to explain, to tell her about Kovich, about the threat, but the fear was choking him, making him clumsy and harsh. "What?" Emily stood up, confusion wrinkling her brow. "Go back where? To the gallery?" "You are done," Dante said, walking past her to pour himself a drink. His hands were shaking, and he needed to hide it. "You quit. Tomorrow, you are not going back there." Emily felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Minutes ago, they had been as close as two people could be. Now, he was issuing orders like she was a soldier in his army. "Dante, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice rising. "We just talked about this. You said you were glad I had a good day." "I was wrong," Dante snapped, turning to face her. "It is not safe." "Why?" Emily demanded. "Because of a phone call? What happened?" "It does not matter what happened," Dante roared, the fear exploding into anger. "What matters is that I say it is too dangerous. I tried. Emily, I tried to let you have your little hobby, but I cannot risk it." "My little hobby," Emily repeated, the words striking her like a physical blow. "Is that what you think this is? My life? My sanity? It is just a hobby you allowed me to have until you changed your mind? I am saving your life," Dante shouted. "You are controlling my life," Emily screamed back. She pushed his hand away as he reached for her. "Do not touch me. Don't you dare touch me." She backed away from him, her eyes filling with fresh tears. But these were not tears of sympathy. They were tears of betrayal. "You almost had me," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You told me that story about your father. Was that just a line? Was that just a way to get me into bed? To make me feel sorry for you so I would forget that you are a tyrant?" Dante flinched. The accusation cut deeper than any knife. "No, that was the truth." "Then why are you doing this?" Emily cried. "Why are you treating me like a prisoner again? Because I have to," Dante pleaded, stepping toward her. "Because it is the only way you know how to love," Emily countered. "You use protection as a leash. Dante, you wrap it around my neck and you pull whenever I get too far away." She looked at him, and the look of disgust on her face broke his heart. "I am not sleeping here," she said coldly. She turned and walked toward the guest bedroom. "Emily, "Wait," Dante called out, taking a step after her. She slammed the door. The sound echoed through the penthouse, final and devastating. Dante stood alone in the living room. The candles were still flickering. The half-eaten dinner was still on the table. The impression of her body was still on the couch. He looked at his hands. He had tried to hold on to her, but he had squeezed too hard, and just as he had feared, just as he had always known, the love he felt for her was the very thing that was tearing them apart. He poured the rest of the wine down the sink, the red liquid swirling away like blood, and stared into the dark, waiting for the war to come. The morning light in the penthouse was sharp and unforgiving. Much like the silence that had stretched between Emily and Dante since the night before, Emily stood by the kitchen island, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. She was dressed in a modest blouse and trousers, but her posture was that of a woman preparing for battle. Dante stood across from her, leaning against the marble counter. He looked wrecked. The shadows under his eyes were darker than his suit jacket, and the tension in his jaw was a visible thing. A wire pulled tight enough to snap. "I am going." "Dante," Emily said. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I am going to walk in there. I am going to look Alex in the eye, and I am going to quit. I will not send a text message like a coward. I will not disappear like a ghost. I need to do this on my own terms." Dante ran a hand over his face, a gesture of pure exhaustion. "It is not safe," he repeated, the words sounding worn, like a track played too many times. "You do not understand what is happening out there." "Then make it safe," Emily countered. "You are the powerful Dante Romano, aren't you? You have men. You have resources. Let me do this one thing. Let me close this door properly so I can come back here and try to figure out us." She gestured vaguely between them. The implication hung heavy in the air. If he stopped her now, if he locked her in the tower again, there would be no us to figure out. Dante looked at her for a long, agonizing moment. He saw the resolve in her eyes, the same fire that had made him fall in love with her, and he knew he had backed himself into a corner. If he forced her to stay, he lost her. If he let her go, he risked losing her. It was a gamble, and Dante hated gambling with things he could not afford to replace. "Fine," he said, the word coming out like a growl, "but you take the car, you take the driver, and there will be a detail following you." "No detail," Emily said immediately. "If Alex sees a convoy of black SUVs, he will know I lied to him about my life. I want to leave with dignity, not a parade. One car," Dante negotiated, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "One discreet car following at a distance, unmarked. They will not approach unless they have to. That is the offer. Emily, take it or I lock the doors myself." Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. One car." Dante pushed off the counter and walked to her. He stopped inches away, his presence overwhelming. He did not touch her, but the heat radiating from him was palpable. "Be fast," he ordered. "Do not linger. You go in, you say your piece, and you come out. If you are not out in 20 minutes, my men are coming in. I will be fast," she promised. The drive to the Arts District was uneventful, but the knot in Emily's stomach tightened with every block. She could see the unmarked gray sedan in the side mirror of her car, keeping a steady 2-car distance. It was a reminder of the leash she had agreed to wear. But at least today, the leash had a little more slack. When she entered the Canvas Collective, the bell chimed cheerfully, a stark contrast to the dread settling in her gut. The gallery was quiet. Alex was at the front desk, sorting through a stack of invoices. He looked up, his face breaking into a warm, easy smile that made Emily feel a pang of guilt. "Emily," he said, standing up, "I didn't think you were coming in today. I thought you said Wednesdays were... I need to talk to you." "Alex," Emily interrupted, walking fully into the room. She kept her hands clasped in front of her to hide their trembling. Alex's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. He came around the desk, leaning against the front of it. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "You look... tired." "I am fine." Emily lied. "Look, Alex, I can't keep working here. I have to resign, effective immediately." Alex blinked, surprised. "Oh, I see. Was it something I said? Is it the pay? Because I know it is not much, but—" No, Emily said quickly. "It is not you. It is complications. At home. My husband. His schedule is changing, and things are just difficult right now. I can't commit to the hours." Alex studied her face. He had an artist's eye, trained to look beneath the surface, and what he saw made him frown. He saw the fear behind the polite apology. He saw the way she checked the front window every few seconds. "Emily," he said gently, "I do not want to overstep, but you seem stressed. Is everything all right with your husband? You seemed pretty upset at the gala." Emily looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "It is just a busy time." Alex took a step closer, his voice lowering. "You know," he said, "everyone deserves to feel safe. Emily, everyone deserves to be respected. If you are leaving because you want to, that is one thing. But if you are leaving because someone is making you, that is something else." The words landed with the weight of stones. They echoed the very thoughts Lily had planted, the very fears that kept Emily awake at night. Was she making a choice, or was she just obeying a command? "I am doing what is best," Emily said, her voice tight. "Thank you for the opportunity. Alex, really, you have a beautiful gallery." She turned to leave before he could say anything else, before the kindness in his eyes could unravel her completely. "Take care of yourself." "Emily," Alex called after her. Emily pushed open the door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sun was shining, but the air felt cold. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had done it. She had severed the tie. Now she could go back to the penthouse and try to fix the mess her marriage had become. She walked toward where her driver was waiting, her phone in her hand. Suddenly, tires screeched. It was a harsh, violent sound that tore through the quiet morning. A white cargo van jumped the curb, cutting off the path to her car. At the same moment, a heavy SUV slammed into the rear of the discreet gray sedan following her, the sound of crumpling metal echoing off the brick buildings. Emily froze. Her brain tried to process the scene, the smoke, the noise, the sudden chaos. The side door of the van slid open with a rasping metal sound. 2 men jumped out. They wore balaclavas and tactical vests. They did not look like street thugs. They looked like soldiers. "Run!" her driver shouted, scrambling to get out of the car, but he was too far away. Emily turned to run back toward the gallery, but a hand grabbed her arm. It was a grip like iron. She screamed. It was a raw, primal sound that ripped from her throat. "Let me go!" she shrieked, kicking out blindly. Her heel connected with a shin, but the man didn't even flinch. He hauled her toward the van as if she weighed nothing. Emily thrashed, her fingernails clawing at his tack vest, breaking against the hard fabric. "Dante!" she screamed, the name tearing from her lips before she could stop it. Another man grabbed her legs, lifting her off the ground. They threw her into the back of the van. The floor was metal and smelled of grease. Emily scrambled backward, trying to get to the open door, but a boot shoved her back down. No, please," she begged. The door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. Outside, on the pavement. Her phone lay where it had fallen from her hand. The screen was cracked. It buzzed once, lighting up with a message from Dante. "Are you done?" Then the van tires squealed again, and the vehicle sped away, disappearing into the city traffic. The phone in Dante's pocket did not buzz. It rang with the specific, piercing tone he had assigned to the emergency line. Dante was standing in his study, pouring a glass of scotch he didn't intend to drink. He froze. The glass shattered in the sink as he dropped it. He answered the phone. "Report," he said. "Boss." The voice on the other end was wet, gurgling. It was the lead from the tail car. "We are hit. SUV. Rammed us. They took her. White van. Heading east." The world stopped. For a second, Dante Romano ceased to exist. There was no breath in his lungs, no beat in his heart. There was only a void, a black hole where his soul used to be. The nightmare he had lived with since he was 12 years old. The nightmare he had built walls of money and violence to keep out, had just walked through the front door. They took her. The paralysis lasted less than a heartbeat. It was replaced by a rage so cold, so absolute, that it felt like ice water in his veins. Dante slammed his hand onto the desk. "Lock it down," he roared, his voice cracking. He strode out of the study, shouting for Nico. "Nico, get the car. Get the team." Nico appeared from the hallway, his face pale. He had already heard the radio chatter. "I have eyes on the van via traffic cams," Nico said, matching Dante's stride as they headed for the elevator. "They are heading to the shipyards, old industrial sector. Shut down the docks," Dante ordered, his voice shaking with a tremor he could not control. "No ship leaves, no truck moves. Call the union, call the police commissioner. Tell him if a single patrol car gets in my way. I will burn this city to the ground." He stepped into the elevator, checking the load on his handgun. His hands were trembling. He stared at them, furious at the weakness. "I told her," he whispered, the words sounding like a prayer and a curse. "I told her it wasn't safe. The warehouse was not like the one Dante owned. This one smelled of rotting fish and gasoline. It was a derelict structure on the edge of the abandoned wharf, a place where the city dumped its unwanted refuse." Emily sat on a wooden chair in the center of the vast, dim space. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back. Her hair was messy, falling into her face, and her cheek throbbed where she had been struck during the struggle. She was terrified. The fear was a physical weight, pressing on her chest, making it hard to breathe. But beneath the fear was a cold clarity. She was in Dante's world now. This was the reality he had tried to hide behind penthouse walls and charity galas. A man walked out of the shadows. He was older, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Emily's car. He looked like a grandfather, except for the eyes. His eyes were dead. "Mrs. Romano," the man said. His voice was gravelly. "I apologize for the accommodations. We usually prefer a more civilized setting for business meetings." "You are Sullivan," Emily said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. The man smiled. "He's a talker. Your husband. He mentions you often, or rather, his obsession with you is what people mention." "What do you want?" Emily asked. "Money?" Sullivan laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "Money? No, my dear. I have money. I want what Dante has. I want the territory. I want the routes. And thanks to you, I am going to get them." He circled her chair, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. "He built quite a castle for you, didn't he?" Sullivan mused. "The penthouse. The guards. Did he tell you who paid for it? Did he tell you about the families he evicted? The debts he collected with a baseball bat?" Emily closed her eyes. "I don't believe you." "Open your eyes." "Emily," Sullivan snapped. "Look at where you are. This is his life. He's not a businessman. He is a butcher in a suit. He will trade anything for power. He will trade his soul. And today, we are going to see if he will trade his empire for you." A heavy metal door at the far end of the warehouse groaned open. Sullivan stopped circling. He looked toward the entrance. "Right on time," he murmured. Dante walked in. He was not alone. Nico and 3 other men flanked him, their weapons drawn and raised. But Dante held his hands out to his sides, showing he was not currently aiming a weapon. He looked at Emily. In that split second, Emily saw everything. She saw the terror in his eyes, a terror that eclipsed anything she was feeling. She saw the sweat on his brow, the sheer desperation etched into the lines of his face. He didn't look like a butcher. He looked like a man watching his heart being ripped out of his chest. "Let her go." "Sullivan," Dante said. His voice was calm, but it was the calm before a hurricane. Sullivan chuckled. He stepped behind Emily, placing a hand on her shoulder. Emily flinched, shrinking away from his touch. Dante's eyes tracked the movement. A muscle feathered in his jaw. "You know the price." "Dante," Sullivan called out, "sign over the Port Authority contracts. Pull your men from the North District. You walk away with nothing, and she walks away alive, and Done, Dante said. The word hung in the air. Nico looked at Dante, shock registering on his face. "Dante, you can't—" "Done?" Dante repeated, louder. "Contracts, territory. Take it, just cut the ties." Sullivan looked surprised. He hadn't expected it to be that easy. He had expected a negotiation, a fight. "You would give it all up?" Sullivan asked, skepticism coloring his tone. "The great Dante Romano? For a girl? She is my wife, Dante said, and if you do not take your hand off her in the next 3 seconds, I will not just kill you, I will erase your entire bloodline from history. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. He sensed a trap. He pulled a gun from his waistband and pressed the barrel against Emily's temple. I think you are lying, Sullivan hissed. Dante's composure shattered. No, he shouted, stepping forward. Drop it, Sullivan yelled. Chaos erupted. It happened in a blur. One of Nico's men saw a shadow move in the rafters. A sniper, he fired. The gunshot echoed like a cannon blast. Move, Dante screamed. He didn't run for cover. He ran for Emily. Bullets began to fly. Sullivan ducked behind Emily's chair, using her as a human shield, firing blindly toward Dante. Dante didn't stop. He threw himself forward, sliding across the gritty concrete. He crashed into the chair, knocking Emily over. The impact knocked the wind out of her. She hit the floor hard, her shoulder taking the brunt of the fall. Dante was on top of her instantly. He was heavy, warm, and solid. He curled his body around hers, covering her head with his hands, shielding her vital organs with his own back. Stay down, he roared into her ear. Above them, the air was filled with the deafening crack of gunfire. Glass from the high windows shattered, raining down like diamonds. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, screaming into Dante's chest. She could feel him flinch every time a bullet struck the floor near them, his muscles jerking as if he were absorbing the blows for her. Nico, Dante shouted. The sniper, left flank. More shots. A scream of pain that wasn't Dante's. Then suddenly, silence. It was a ringing, heavy silence, broken only by the sound of labored breathing and the tinkle of falling glass. Clear, Nico's voice called out, sounding breathless. Dante didn't move immediately. He stayed curled around her, his heavy breathing ragged against her ear. Emily? He whispered. I'm okay, she sobbed. I'm okay. Dante shifted. He pulled a knife from his belt. Emily flinched, but he only reached behind her, slashing the zip ties with a single, violent motion. Her arms fell free. Dante grabbed her, hauling her to her feet. He didn't let her walk. He scooped her up into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. He turned and walked toward the exit, stepping over the debris. He didn't look at Sullivan, who lay motionless on the floor. He only looked at the door. Dante. Emily wept, clutching his shirt. Your arm. He glanced down. His left sleeve was torn, blood seeping through the fabric where a graze had caught him. It is nothing, he said through gritted teeth. He carried her out into the cool evening air. The sirens were wailing in the distance, getting closer. He set her down near the SUV, but he didn't let go. He cupped her face in his hands, his fingers trembling violently. He tilted her head back, scanning her face, checking her eyes, her lips, the bruise on her cheek. Did they touch you? He demanded, his voice broken, aside from the chair. Did they touch you? No, Emily cried, shaking her head. No, Dante. He pulled her into him, burying his face in her neck. He let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. I got you, he whispered fiercely. I got you. I promise. No one will ever touch you again. I will burn the whole world before I let them touch you. Emily clung to him. She could feel the tremors running through his body, the sheer terror radiating off him. In that moment, surrounded by violence and blood, she realized the depth of his love. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. And it had almost gotten him killed. The doctor left the master bedroom quietly, closing the door with a soft click. She is fine, the doctor told Dante, who was standing by the window, staring out at the city lights. Just bruising. Shock. I gave her a mild sedative to help her sleep, but she is fighting it. She wants to talk to you. Dante nodded. He didn't turn around. Leave us. The doctor left. Dante stood there for a long moment. He had washed the blood off his hands, but he could still feel it. He could still smell the warehouse. He could still see the gun pressed against Emily's temple. He turned and walked to the bed. Emily was sitting up, propped against the pillows. She looked small, pale. The bruise on her cheek was darkening to a purple, ugly mark against her skin. She watched him approach. Her eyes were not filled with gratitude. They were filled with a haunted, desperate need for answers. Dante sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't reach for her. He folded his hands in his lap, staring at them. Sullivan said. Emily started, her voice raspy. Sullivan said, "Your empire is built on blood." He said you are a butcher. Dante closed his eyes. He wanted to lie. He wanted to tell her Sullivan was a liar, a monster who said things to hurt her. He wanted to wrap her in the illusion of the legitimate businessman one last time. But he looked at the bruise on her face. He looked at the way her hands were shaking. The illusion was dead. It had died in the back of a white van. He's right, Dante said. The silence in the room was deafening. Emily let out a small, sharp breath. "Tell me," she whispered. "Everything." Dante looked up. He met her gaze. "I didn't start the war, Emily, but I finished it. When my father died, the territory was in chaos. I had to secure it." "What does that mean?" Emily asked. "Secure it? It means I removed the people who killed him," Dante said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, because if he let the emotion in, he would break. "It means I made deals with bad men to keep worse men out. It means retaliation. Did you—" Emily stopped. She swallowed hard. "Did you kill people?" Dante didn't flinch. "Yes." Emily recoiled. She pressed herself back against the headboard, putting inches between them. "How many?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Does it matter?" Dante asked wearily. 1? 10? 100? "I did what I had to do to survive. I did what I had to do to build this. To build the walls that keep you safe." "Safe?" Emily cried out, a hysterical edge entering her voice. "I was zip-tied to a chair in a warehouse. Dante, I had a gun to my head. That is not safe. I saved you," Dante argued, his voice rising. "I walked in there and I saved you. You created the danger," Emily shouted back. "You are the reason I was there. Sullivan didn't want me. He wanted you. He wanted your bloody empire." She looked at him, and for the first time, she looked at him with horror. She saw the man who had shielded her with his body, yes, but she also saw the man who had pulled the trigger. She saw the violence that lived inside him, coiling like a snake beneath his expensive suits. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I did. I thought you were a hard man who had to make tough choices. But you are—" "I am a monster?" Dante supplied, his voice quiet. "Is that it?" "I don't know if I can do this," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can love a man who has done these things. I don't know if I can sleep in this bed knowing what paid for it." Dante felt his heart shatter. It was a clean break, sharper than the glass in the warehouse. "Emily," he pleaded, reaching for her hand. "Don't," she said, pulling away. "Just don't." She scrambled off the other side of the bed. She grabbed a pillow and a blanket, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. "I am sleeping in the guest room," she said. "Do not follow me." She walked out of the room. She didn't slam the door this time. She closed it softly, a sound of finality that was far worse than any slam. Dante sat alone on the edge of the bed. The room was cold. The city outside was bright and alive, oblivious to the ruin inside the penthouse. He looked at his hands again. They were clean, but they felt heavy, stained with invisible ink that told the story of every sin he had committed. He had saved her life, but in doing so, he had destroyed the only thing that made his life worth living. He buried his face in his hands and sat in the darkness, waiting for the dawn that would bring no relief. The silence in the penthouse was not the peaceful quiet of a library. It was the suffocating, pressurized silence of a submarine resting at the bottom of the ocean. 3 days had passed since the warehouse, since the blood and the broken glass and the truth that had shattered the illusion of their marriage. Emily Carter Romano moved through the guest wing like a ghost. She slept in the guest bedroom, a space decorated in impersonal creams and beiges, far removed from the dark, masculine luxury of the master suite. She avoided the common areas when she knew Dante was home, timing her movements to the rhythm of his absences. When they did cross paths in the hallway, or briefly in the foyer, they moved like magnets with the same polarity, repelling each other with a force field of hurt and unresolved fear. Dante was barely a presence, yet he was everywhere. He buried himself in his study, the door constantly closed, muffled voices of security teams drifting through the wood. He was working, planning, fortifying, but Emily knew he was also hiding. The man who had faced down a rival boss with a gun to his wife's head was now terrified to face the wife he had saved. On the fourth day, Emily left the penthouse. She did not ask for permission. She simply told the new head of security, a stone-faced man named Russo, that she was going to her therapy appointment. The car ride was tense, the armored SUV feeling more like a prison transport than a luxury vehicle. Russo drove, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. Emily stared out the window, watching Riverton City roll by, a city that looked different now that she knew what kind of monsters lived in its shadows. Her therapist's office was in a quiet medical building on the west side, a neutral zone of potted plants and soft music. After the session, where Emily spent 50 minutes talking around the edges of her trauma without admitting the illegal reality of it, she stepped out into the crisp autumn air. Russo was waiting by the car, but another man intercepted her before she could reach the curb. Mrs. Romano? He was tall, wearing a suit that was off the rack, not bespoke. He had a kind face, tired eyes, and the unassuming posture of a man who spent a lot of time waiting. Emily stopped. Russo took a step forward, his hand moving toward his jacket, but the man held up a badge. Special Agent Cole Turner. FBI, the man said calmly. I am not here to cause a scene. Russo, I just want a word with Mrs. Romano. Russo looked at Emily. The protocol was to shove her in the car and drive away. But Emily was tired of protocols. She was tired of men deciding who she could talk to. It is okay, she said to Russo. Give us a minute. Turner nodded his thanks and gestured to a concrete bench near the building entrance. Away from the ears of the bodyguard, I know you have had a rough week. Emily, Turner said gently. He used her first name, stripping away the Romano title that felt like a target these days. We heard about the warehouse. We know Sullivan took you. Emily wrapped her coat tighter around herself. If you know about it, why didn't you stop it? We are building a case, Turner said, his voice regretful. These things take time. We have been watching Dante for 6 years. We've been watching the syndicate for 20. We know about the docks. We know about the payoffs. And now, we know about the kidnapping. He turned to look at her, his expression earnest. You do not belong in this world. Emily, I have read your file. You are a small-town girl. You like art. You volunteer. You fell in love with a man, not a mob boss, but now you are in the crossfire. What do you want? Emily asked, her voice hollow. I want to offer you a way out, Turner said. He reached into his jacket pocket. Russo tensed, but Turner only pulled out a business card. Witness protection, Turner said softly. We can relocate you. New name, new history, a fresh start in a town where no one knows the name Romano. You could have a normal life again. A life where you do not have to check the exits when you walk into a room. Emily looked at the card. Normal life. It was the thing she had screamed she wanted just days ago. And in exchange, she asked, in exchange, you tell us what you know. Turner said, you testify. You help us take the Romano syndicate apart, brick by brick. He leaned in slightly. Dante is going down. Emily. It is not a matter of if, but when. The walls are closing in. Sullivan is just the beginning. You can go down with him, or you can help us end the violence. You can save yourself. Emily stared at him. She thought of Dante shielding her body with his own. She thought of the way his hands shook when he checked her for injuries. She also thought of the gun at her temple and the cold realization that his empire was built on bones. Think about it, Turner said, pressing the card into her hand, before it is too late. While Emily sat on a bench with the FBI, Dante sat in his study, staring at a bottle of scotch he refused to open. Nico stood across the desk. The lieutenant looked haggard. The warehouse rescue had been a success, but the fallout was catastrophic. The streets were buzzing. The truce with the Sullivans was shattered, and worse, the police were circling closer than ever. It is not just outside pressure, Nico said, his voice low. We are hemorrhaging information. Dante, The feds knew about the warehouse hit before we even cleared the perimeter. Sullivan knew exactly where to grab Emily. This is not a sloppy operation. This is a leak from the top. Dante rubbed his temples. He knew what Nico was going to say. He had been dancing around the truth for weeks, blinding himself with loyalty. Who? Dante asked. Nico hesitated, then sighed. Marco. Dante closed his eyes. Marco, his cousin, the boy he had grown up with. He has been meeting with people. Nico continued. Off the books. He is unhappy. Dante, he thinks you are going soft. He thinks the changes you are making, moving money into construction, into clean tech, he thinks you are bleeding the family dry. He wants the old days back. He wants the blood back, Dante corrected bitterly. Ambition is a dangerous drug, Nico said, and Marco has been overdosing on it. If he is talking to the rivals. Dante. He might be talking to the law, too, buying himself insurance in case the ship goes down. Dante stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were coming on, a grid of gold against the darkening sky. He had spent 10 years trying to turn this criminal empire into something legitimate, something that didn't require looking over his shoulder. He was so close. Watch him, Dante ordered, his voice cold. Do not touch him yet. We need proof. But if he is selling us out. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That night, the penthouse was a tomb. The air conditioning hummed, circulating the chill. It was 2 a.m. when Emily walked into the kitchen. She couldn't sleep. Her mind was a carousel of images. Turner's business card, Sullivan's dead eyes, Dante's desperate embrace. She didn't turn on the main lights, relying on the under-cabinet lighting that cast a soft, amber glow over the marble counters. She startled when she saw a figure standing by the refrigerator. Dante. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking stripped down and vulnerable. He held a glass of water, his knuckles white against the crystal. I didn't mean to scare you, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. I am not scared, Emily said automatically, though her heart had skipped a beat. She walked to the cupboard to get a glass. The kitchen was huge, but suddenly it felt incredibly small. They were 2 planets forced into the same orbit, the gravity between them undeniable and dangerous. I saw the car logs, Dante said quietly. You went to Dr. Evans. Yes, Emily said, filling her glass at the sink. Did it help? No. Emily turned to face him. He looked defeated. The arrogance was gone. The power was gone. He was just a man standing in a kitchen, looking at his wife like she was a ghost he was afraid to touch. Why didn't you tell me, Emily asked. Tell you what? That you were trying to get out, she said. Dante froze. He looked at her, confusion warring with wariness. I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me, Dante, Emily said, her voice trembling. Not anymore. I heard you on the phone yesterday. I heard you talking to your lawyer about the construction permits, about the clean energy transfer. She took a step closer. You are moving the money. She said, you're trying to go legit. Dante set his glass down. He slumped against the counter, the fight draining out of him. For 3 years, he admitted. I have been trying for 3 years. It is not like flipping a switch, Emily. You cannot just wash the blood off the money overnight. It takes time. It takes deals. Why didn't you tell me, she asked again, tears pricking her eyes. Because I wanted to give it to you finished, Dante said, his voice rising with emotion. I wanted to hand you a life that was clean. I didn't want you to see the mess. I didn't want you to know how hard it was to scrub the stains out. I wanted to wake up one morning and tell you that I was just a businessman, and it would be the truth. He looked at her, his eyes burning. I did it for you, Emily. Before I met you, I didn't care. I was happy being the king of the ashes. But then I wanted a white picket fence. I wanted to be the man you thought I was. Emily felt a sob rise in her throat. She looked at this man, this dangerous, violent, complicated man, and she saw the love that drove him. He had been fighting a war she didn't even know about, trying to build a raft to carry them both to safety. You dragged me into this war? Dante, she whispered, but you were trying to get me out. I failed, he rasped. I wasn't fast enough. He looked away. unable to bear her gaze. "I am sorry," he whispered. The distance between them was 5 feet of marble floor, but it felt like miles of hurt. Yet, as Emily watched him, the anger that had been fueling her for days began to dissolve. Replaced by a profound, aching sorrow, they were both victims of his past. She took a step toward him, then another. Dante looked up, surprised by her movement. He didn't move. He stood frozen, as if he were afraid that breathing would scare her away. Emily reached up. Her hand trembled as she brushed a tear from his cheek, a tear he hadn't even realized he had shed. His skin was warm. The contact sent a shockwave through both of them. "Dante," she breathed. He made a sound in his throat, a sound of pure longing. He stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. He didn't grab her, and he didn't claim her. He just rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "I missed you," he whispered. "God, I missed you." Emily didn't pull away. She leaned into him, her hand sliding up his chest to grip his t-shirt. "I am still angry," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I am still scared, I know," he murmured, "but I don't want to be alone," she said. Dante lifted his head. He looked at her mouth. The question was there, silent and heavy. Emily answered it by closing the gap. She kissed him. It wasn't like their first kiss, full of fire and jealousy, and it wasn't like the kiss after the gala, full of desperation. This was slow. It was aching. It was a kiss that tasted of salt and regret, and a love that refused to die despite everything they had done to kill it. Dante's arms went around her, pulling her flush against him. He held her as if she were made of glass, as if he were terrified he would break her again. Emily melted into him. The physical connection was a balm on the raw wounds of the last few days. Her body remembered him even when her mind was at war. Dante turned, lifting her effortlessly. He set her on the edge of the kitchen island. It was a familiar motion, an echo of happier nights. But this time, it felt weighted with significance. He stepped between her legs, his hands resting securely at her waist. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder. She inhaled the scent of him, soap and skin and the faint, lingering smell of the city. "Don't let go," she whispered. "Never." He promised. Their kisses grew more urgent, a frantic need to erase the silence of the guest room, to deny the reality of the FBI agent and the traitorous cousin. The refrigerator light flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the kitchen as they clung to each other. It wasn't just passion, it was a desperate affirmation of life. In the face of death and prison, they chose each other. Later, the silence had returned, but it was no longer heavy. It was the quiet of a storm that had momentarily passed. They sat side by side on the kitchen floor, their backs resting against the cabinets. Emily's legs were drawn up to her chest, her head resting on Dante's shoulder. He held her hand, his thumb tracing the knuckles over and over again. "Dante," Emily said into the quiet. "The FBI approached me today." Dante's hand stopped moving. He didn't pull away. He didn't stiffen. He just went perfectly, unnaturally still. He let out a long, slow breath. "Agent Turner?" Dante asked. Emily nodded against his shoulder. "Yes." Dante stared at the opposite wall. He wasn't surprised. He had known they would come. He had known Emily was the weak point in his fortress, the one person who could walk through the gates and open them from the inside. "What did they offer?" he asked. His voice was low, devoid of anger. It sounded almost resigned. "Witness protection," Emily said. "A new life, a normal life, somewhere far away." Dante closed his eyes. He could picture it. Emily in a small town, safe, happy, maybe teaching art to children. A life without bodyguards. A life without him. It was exactly what he wanted for her, and it broke him to think about it. "You should take it," he said. Emily lifted her head. She looked at him, shocked. "What? If things go south," Dante said, looking at her with devastating honesty, "if the walls come down." "You should take it. You deserve a life that isn't poisoned." "Emily, I don't want a life without you," Emily said, her voice cracking. "You might not have a choice." Dante said. "If they have a case, I am not going to let you go to prison for me. I would rather you be a witness against me than an inmate beside me. Dante." "I mean it," he said fiercely. "If it comes down to it, you or me, you choose yourself. You hear me? You choose yourself." Before Emily could answer, before she could tell him that she had already chosen him, the world intruded. Dante's phone, left on the counter above them, began to buzz. It wasn't a call. It was a barrage of notifications, news alerts, messages. Dante reached up and grabbed the phone. He looked at the screen. His face went ashen. "What is it?" Emily asked, fear spiking in her chest. Dante stood up, pulling Emily up with him. "Marco," he said, his voice turning into a snarl. He swiped the screen, showing her a breaking news alert. "Gang war erupts in Riverton, explosion at Irish Syndicate HQ. Police raiding Romano properties." "He did it," Dante said, staring at the phone in disbelief. "The idiot actually did it. He hit the Sullivans without my order. He bombed their clubhouse." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Not one or two, but a chorus of them, rising from the streets below like a scream. "He started a war," Dante whispered, "and he brought the police right to our front door." The elevator chimed. Russo burst into the penthouse, his weapon drawn, looking panicked. "Boss," Russo shouted, "we have to move. The feds are downstairs. They have a warrant. They're hitting the lobby." Dante looked at Emily. The time for slow transitions and legitimate businesses was over. The house of cards had collapsed. "Go to your room," Dante ordered Russo. "Lock the doors. Do not let them in until I say so." He turned to Emily. He grabbed her face in his hands. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "Whatever happens, say nothing. Do not talk to them without a lawyer. Do not trust Turner. Dante, promise me," he shouted over the sound of the approaching sirens. "I promise." She sobbed. The next 12 hours were a blur of chaos. The penthouse was raided, computers were seized, files were boxed up. Dante was taken into custody for questioning but released on a technicality 24 hours later, his high-priced lawyers earning every cent of their retainer. But the reprieve was temporary. The city was in lockdown. The news was running 24/7 coverage of the Romano War. 2 days later, Emily received a summons. It wasn't a request for a chat on a bench. It was a formal subpoena to appear at the federal building. She sat in a cold, sterile conference room. Agent Turner sat on one side of the table, a stern-looking woman in a power suit. The district attorney sat on the other. Emily sat in the middle, her lawyer, a shark named Goldman. Beside her, Mrs. "Romano," the district attorney began, shuffling a stack of files. "We are going to be blunt. The situation has changed." "How?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "We have a witness," Turner said quietly. Emily looked at him. "Someone from the inside," Turner continued. "Someone who was there for the orders. Someone who can tie Dante to the warehouse, to the docks, to the bombing last week." "Marco," Emily whispered. Turner nodded. "Marco DeLuca turned himself in this morning. He's cutting a deal. He's giving us everything. He is painting Dante as the mastermind behind the bombing, claiming he was just following orders." "He's lying," Emily blurted out. "Dante didn't order that." He was furious. The district attorney leaned forward. "It doesn't matter what you believe, Mrs. Romano. It matters what Marco testifies to. And right now, Marco is our star witness. Unless what?" Emily asked. "Unless we have someone closer," Turner said. "Someone who can contradict him. Someone who can prove Marco went rogue, but also someone who can confirm the other charges against Dante to ensure he doesn't walk away completely free." They looked at her. The trap was sprung. "Here is the deal," the district attorney said. "Marco is willing to bury Dante to save himself. He will put your husband on death row for the bombing if we let him. But if you cooperate, if you testify, we can offer a plea," Turner finished. "If you give us the structure, if you help us dismantle the syndicate, we can offer Dante a deal. He pleads to the racketeering. He takes the fall for the financial crimes. But we drop the murder charges for the bombing. He avoids the death penalty. He avoids life in a supermax." Emily felt the room spin. "So my choice," she said, her voice barely audible, is to let Marco lie and kill my husband. Or testify against my husband to save his life? Exactly, the district attorney said. Turner slid a piece of paper across the table. It is a betrayal either way. Emily, Turner said softly, but one of them keeps him alive. Emily stared at the paper. She thought of Dante in the kitchen, telling her to choose herself. She thought of him trying to go legit for her. She thought of the love that had survived kidnapping and silence. She looked up at Turner. I need to see him, she said. That is not... The DA started. I need to see him. Emily slammed her hand on the table. If you want me to destroy his life to save it, I need to look him in the eye. Turner looked at the DA. He nodded slowly. Arrange it, Turner said. But Mrs. Romano, once you walk into that room, there is no going back. Emily stood up. She knew there was no going back. There hadn't been any going back since the moment she put on that short black dress. I am ready, she said. The inevitable arrival of the end did not come with a bang, but with a synchronized, mechanical precision that was almost terrifying to watch. Emily sat in the living room of the penthouse, her knees drawn up to her chest, the remote control clutched in a hand that would not stop shaking. On the massive television screen, the breaking news banner was a slash of urgent red. The footage was shaky, shot from a helicopter circling the Romano construction headquarters downtown. It showed a perimeter of black SUVs, the flashing lights of police cruisers, and a swarm of federal agents moving like ants around the building entrance. Then, the doors opened. Dante emerged. He was flanked by 4 agents, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was not wearing his jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the column of his throat. He did not look like a man who had been defeated. He walked with his head high, his stride even, ignoring the chaos of the shouting reporters and the blinding flashbulbs popping like lightning storms around him. But Emily saw what the cameras missed. She saw the way his eyes scanned the crowd, moving rapidly, searching. He was looking for a threat. He was looking for her. And when he realized she wasn't there, that she was safe in the tower he had built, his shoulders dropped by a fraction of an inch. He allowed himself to be guided into the back of a federal vehicle, his expression smoothing into a mask of stone. Emily turned off the television. The silence that rushed back into the room was deafening. He was gone. The king had fallen, and she was left alone in the castle that was rapidly becoming a cage of memories. The days leading up to the trial were a blur of lawyers, subpoenas, and sleepless nights. The bed felt vast and empty, a cold expanse of linen that smelled faintly of his cologne, sandalwood and rain. Emily barely slept, when she did. Her dreams were a disjointed montage of their life together. She saw the way his jaw clenched when he saw her in the black dress, the jealousy burning in his eyes. She saw the warehouse, the way he had thrown his body over hers without a second of hesitation, shielding her from bullets with his own flesh. She saw the quiet moments, the mornings where he would make espresso with focused concentration, the way he listened to her talk about art as if she were explaining the secrets of the universe. She was terrified. She was going to have to stand up in front of a judge, in front of the world, and in front of him, and tell the truth. But the truth was a complicated, jagged thing. Was he a monster? Yes. Was he the love of her life? God help her, yes. The federal detention center was a fortress of gray concrete and fluorescent lights that hummed with a headache-inducing pitch. Emily sat in a small, private visitation room. There was no warmth here. There was only a metal table, 2 bolted-down chairs, and a thick pane of reinforced glass separating 2 worlds. The door on the other side buzzed open. Dante walked in. He wore an orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with his dark coloring. He looked thinner. The shadows under his eyes were deep bruises, and he hadn't shaved in days. But when he saw her, the exhaustion lifted for a heartbeat, replaced by a look of such raw hunger it made Emily's breath hitch. He sat down slowly, picking up the black phone receiver mounted on the wall. Emily did the same. "You shouldn't be here," Dante said. His voice, filtered through the phone line, sounded tinny and distant. "I had to see you. Emily replied, her grip on the receiver tight. Dante looked at her, his eyes tracing every inch of her face as if memorizing it for a long winter. "They told me you were testifying," he said. "Yes." "Good," Dante said. He leaned forward, his intensity burning through the glass. "Do not protect me. Emily, do not lie for me. You go up there, and you tell them everything. You tell them I am the villain. You tell them whatever you need to tell them to walk away from this clean. I am not going to lie," Emily said softly. "But I am not going to paint you as a monster either." "He is a monster," Dante said, his voice rough. "That is what the world needs to see. If you defend me, they will drag you down with me. I want you to have a life, Emily. A real life." "I never wanted this life," Emily admitted, tears pricking her eyes. "I never wanted the guards, or the fear, or the blood." "I know," Dante whispered. "I know, baby." "But," Emily continued, her voice cracking, "I fell in love with the man who carried me out of that warehouse. I fell in love with the man who held me when I couldn't breathe. I fell in love with the man who cooked pasta with me at 2 a.m. and looked at me like I was the only light in the world." Dante closed his eyes, a look of agony crossing his face. "Don't," he rasped. "Don't make me hope. I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life missing you. Don't make it harder." Emily reached out, pressing her palm flat against the cold glass. Dante opened his eyes. He hesitated, then slowly raised his own hand. He pressed his palm against hers on the other side. They were separated by 2 inches of bulletproof material, but the connection was electric. Their hands matched, a mirror image of longing. "You are my strength," Emily said. "You always were." "You are my heart," Dante replied. "And I am sorry I broke it." The guard knocked on the door. Time was up. They pulled their hands away, the loss of contact physical and painful. Dante hung up the phone, looking at her one last time before turning to walk back into his cage. The courtroom was packed. The air smelled of floor wax and anticipation. Emily sat in the front row, her hands clasped in her lap to stop them from shaking. Marco DeLuca was on the stand. Dante's cousin looked confident, smug even. He wore a suit that didn't fit him quite right, and he spoke with the rehearsed cadence of a man who had memorized a script. He tore Dante apart. He described orders that were never given, hits that were never sanctioned, painting Dante as a cold, bloodthirsty mastermind who reveled in violence while Marco was merely a helpless pawn. He didn't care about anyone, Marco told the jury, pointing a finger at Dante. He would burn down a city block just to prove a point. He is an animal. Dante sat at the defense table, stone-faced, staring straight ahead. He didn't react. He accepted the betrayal as penance. Then, it was Emily's turn. She took the stand. She swore to tell the truth. She looked out at the sea of faces, then at Dante. He gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. "Save yourself, Mrs. Romano," the prosecutor began. "Can you tell us about your husband's business dealings?" Emily took a deep breath. "My husband is a criminal," she said clearly. Her voice rang out in the silent room. "He has run illegal gambling rings. He has bribed officials. He has authorized violence against those who threatened his territory." The prosecutor smiled, thinking he had won. But Emily continued, turning to look at the jury. "That is not the whole truth. Dante was born into a war he didn't start. For the last 3 years, he's been trying to end it. He's been moving assets into legitimate construction. He's been funding community centers to keep kids off the streets." She looked at Marco, her gaze hardening. "He didn't order the bombing of the Sullivan Clubhouse," she said firmly. "He was with me that night. We were in our kitchen. He was crying because he wanted a life where he didn't have to hurt anyone. He was trying to get out. He wanted to dismantle the syndicate, not expand it." She turned back to Dante. "He is not a saint," she said softly, "but he is not the monster his cousin is describing. He's a man who is drowning, and he tried to build a raft to save us both." Her testimony did not exonerate him, but it humanized him. It stripped away the myth of the untouchable Don and revealed the flawed, desperate man underneath. The effect was palpable. The prosecution's narrative of the remorseless killer faltered. In the recess that followed, Dante's high-powered lawyer met with the district attorney. A deal was struck. Dante would plead guilty to racketeering and corruption. He would provide a full layout of the syndicate's operations, effectively dismantling the Romano Empire from the top down. He would testify against the corrupt judges and police chiefs on his payroll. In exchange, the murder charges were dropped. He would serve a reduced sentence of 5 years, followed by entry into the witness security program. His old life was dead. Dante Romano would cease to exist. The paperwork was being finalized in a secure holding area behind the courtrooms. Emily stood in the corridor, waiting for a final word with Dante before he was taken back to custody. The doors at the end of the hall opened. Dante was being escorted by 2 marshals. He was shackled at the waist and ankles, moving slowly. Suddenly, a side door burst open. It was Marco. He had slipped away from his handlers during the confusion of the plea deal announcement. His face was twisted in a rictus of hate. In his hand, he held a sharpened piece of metal, a shank fashioned from a broken filing bracket. "You rat!" Marco screamed, charging at Dante. "You ruined everything!" Dante turned, but the shackles restricted his movement. He couldn't dodge. He couldn't fight back. The marshals were slow to react, surprised by the sudden intrusion. Emily didn't think. She didn't weigh the risks. She moved on instinct. "Dante!" she screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing the lapels of Dante's suit jacket and throwing her weight backward. "Get down!" She pulled him off balance. Dante crashed to the floor, dragging Emily down with him. The movement saved his life. Marco's blade slashed through the air where Dante's throat had been a millisecond before, catching only empty space. Before Marco could strike again, security guards tackled him. He hit the floor with a bone-crunching thud, screaming curses as he was subdued and handcuffed. Dante lay on the linoleum floor. Emily sprawled half on top of him. He wasn't looking at Marco. He was looking at her. His eyes were wide with shock, with a raw, terrifying gratitude. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice shaking as he tried to lift his shackled hands to check her. "Did he touch you?" "I am fine," Emily panted, scrambling off him. "I am fine." The marshals helped Dante to his feet. He looked at Emily, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. For years, he had treated her as a fragile thing, a piece of porcelain to be kept on a high shelf. He had thought she was his weakness, the vulnerability his enemies would exploit. But she wasn't porcelain. She was steel. "You saved me," Dante whispered, ignoring the marshals urging him to move. "You saved me first," Emily replied, her voice steady. Dante shook his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I thought I had to protect you with power, but you protected me with courage. You were never my weakness. Emily, you were always my strength. Move it." "Romano," a marshal barked. Dante let them lead him away. But as he walked down the corridor, the shackles clinking with every step, he looked back over his shoulder. His gaze held hers, a promise burning in the dark eyes. "Wait for me. I will," she mouthed. 18 months later, the town did not have a famous name. It was a quiet place in the Pacific Northwest, where the mountains met the mist and the coffee was strong. It was a place where people didn't ask too many questions about where you came from, only about where you were going. A small auto repair shop sat on the edge of town. Inside, a man in blue coveralls was wiping grease from his hands with a rag. His name was Daniel, and he was quiet, hard-working, and the best mechanic the town had ever seen. He didn't wear Italian suits anymore. He wore work boots and flannel. There was dirt under his fingernails instead of blood. He clocked out, waving to the owner, and walked out into the late afternoon sun. He walked 2 blocks to a small community center that had recently opened, funded by an anonymous donation. Inside, children were laughing, painting on large sheets of paper spread on the floor. A woman was moving among them, praising their use of color, wiping paint from their noses. Her name was Elena. She looked happy. She looked free. She looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. Her face lit up with a smile that rivaled the sun. Daniel walked her home. Their house was modest, a small cottage with a porch that needed painting and a garden that was wild and overgrown. It was imperfect. It was small. It was the most beautiful thing Daniel had ever owned. They made dinner together in the small kitchen. No chefs, no servants, just chopping vegetables and boiling water. After dinner, Emily went into the bedroom to change. Daniel stayed in the kitchen, drying the dishes. He felt a peace he had never known in his previous life. The silence here wasn't heavy, it was content. He heard her footsteps. He turned around. Emily stood in the doorway. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window behind her, creating a halo of light. She was wearing a dress. It was a simple, floral summer dress, light and airy, but it was short. The hem stopped mid-thigh, revealing her long, bare legs catching the golden light. Daniel stopped drying the plate. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. His eyes swept over her, taking in the curve of her hips, the sun on her skin, the confident tilt of her chin. There was no suspicion in his eyes this time, no jealousy. No fear of who else might see her. There was only appreciation, love, and a playful spark of memory. He smiled slowly, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Who are you trying to impress?" he asked, his voice low and warm. Emily grinned. She walked toward him, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. She stopped in front of him, wrapping her arms around his neck, smelling of paint and vanilla. "You," she replied, looking up into his eyes. "Always you." Daniel laughed, a rich sound that filled the small kitchen. He dropped the dish towel and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "Consider me impressed," he murmured. He lowered his head and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of freedom. It was a kiss that held the memory of danger but the promise of peace. Their bodies pressed together, casting a single shadow on the floor of their modest home. Outside, the sun dipped below the mountains, and for the first time in forever, love stood tall without the shadow of fear. Closing message. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Who are you trying to impress? I hope you enjoyed the journey of Emily and Dante as much as I enjoyed writing it. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below letting me know where in the world you are listening from and what you thought of the ending. Did Dante deserve his second chance? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more emotional, realistic, and passionate tales. Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in English in the comments section. Until next time.